My wife had just left for the store when my 7-year-old daughter stepped into my office and whispered, "Daddy, we need to leave right now." My daughter has never been a dramatic child. I want you to understand that before anything else, because everything that follows depends on it. Emma is 7 years old, was 7 years old when this happened, and she is the kind of child who tells you calmly when she's hurt, who asks questions instead of crying, who once watched me stitch a cut on my hand with a first aid kit and said, with scientific interest, "Does that pull?" She does not exaggerate. She does not perform. She inherited, for better or worse, my particular brand of emotional compression. So when she appeared in the doorway of my home office that Saturday morning, barefoot, still in her pajamas with the small yellow stars on them, and I looked up from my laptop and saw that she was shaking, I did not tell myself I was overreacting. I stood up before she said a single word. "We don't have time," she whispered. "We have to go, now." Her eyes were wrong. Not scared the way children get scared by loud noises or bad dreams. Scared the way adults get scared when they understand something. Scared like she had heard something that had crossed a wire in her 7-year-old brain and produced an understanding she did not have the language for, but could not ignore. "Okay," I said. I did not ask questions yet. I picked up my keys. "Let's go." We were in the car in 90 seconds. I had been sitting in that office for 2 hours by the time Emma found me, reviewing quarterly reports for a Saturday morning habit I'd had for most of my adult life. My name is Daniel Hargrove. I'm 44 years old and I own a mid-sized commercial construction and real estate development firm, Hargrove Group, that I built from a one-man operation into a company with 63 employees and projects in 4 states. I built it the way I do everything, methodically, without shortcuts, with a deep distrust of anything that looked easier than it should. I had trusted exactly 2 people unconditionally in my adult life. One was Trevor Higgins, my business partner and best friend of 22 years. He had been there from the beginning, from the truck and the tool belt and the first contract we won together in our mid-20s. He was the best man at my wedding. He was Emma's godfather. When I tried to describe our friendship to people who asked, I always used the same word, foundational. He was load-bearing. I had built everything around him. The other was Catherine Hargrove, née Marsh, 39 years old, a former commercial interior designer who now managed the aesthetic and presentation side of our residential projects, and who had been, for 8 years, the person I came home to. She was precise and beautiful in the way that certain things are beautiful. A well-drafted blueprint, a clean contract. She said what she meant. She didn't waste words. I had loved both of them without reservation. That's the thing about unconditional trust. It does not protect itself. It cannot. Catherine had left for the grocery store at 9:40 a.m. She texted me her standard departure message. "Back in an hour, need anything?" And I'd said coffee filters and heard the garage door close behind her. Normal. Completely normal. I had gone back to my reports. 20 minutes later, Emma was in my doorway shaking. I drove 2 blocks before I pulled over. "Tell me what you heard," I said. "Everything. From the beginning." Emma sat in the back seat, hands clasped in her lap, in the careful posture she assumes when she's concentrating. She had been in her room, she said. She'd come out to get a glass of water and heard voices upstairs from my bedroom. She had thought it was the TV, so she went up. The door was cracked. "Who was in there, Em?" "Mom," she said, "and Uncle Trevor." The temperature of the car seemed to change. I did not move. "What were they saying?" She swallowed, looked at her hands, then looked at me with those precise, careful eyes. "They said the police would think it was an accident." I heard the words. I felt them go through me the way a cold wind goes through. Not painful, not immediately, just suddenly present in every part of you at once. My phone buzzed. Catherine. Forgot my wallet. Back in 10 minutes. I stared at the screen. 10 minutes. 10 minutes from now, Catherine would be back in that house, and Trevor was already inside. And whatever they had discussed in my bedroom, whatever it was that the police were supposed to think was an accident, had been planned to happen inside that window. I did not go back. I put the car in drive, and I drove to the police station, and I did not stop shaking until Emma reached forward from the back seat and put her small hand on my shoulder. I am not a man who panics. I want to be clear about this, not as a point of pride, but because it's relevant to what happened next. I have managed construction site emergencies, financial crises, a lawsuit that nearly took the company when I was 31 years old. My operating principle, one I had drilled into myself and into every manager I'd ever trained, is that when something goes wrong, you do not react. You calculate. I made 3 calls on the drive to the station. The first was to my attorney, Paul Decker, 16 years of business and civil litigation, who had shepherded Hargrove Group through every serious legal situation I'd ever faced. I got his voicemail, left a clipped message, and moved on. The second was to my accountant, Sandra Yee, CPA, 12 years handling Hargrove Group's books, the woman who knew our financial architecture better than I did. I told her to review the last 18 months of company transactions and flag anything she hadn't authorized and I hadn't discussed with her. I told her it was urgent. She said she'd have something for me by end of day. The third call was to Rick Sullivan. Rick had been with me for 9 years. Former Marine, 2 tours, a career in corporate security that had brought him to my company as head of site security when we started taking on projects large enough to require it. He was 51 years old, built like a man who takes the stairs, and had a particular quality I had always valued above everything else. else. He told me the truth even when the truth was expensive. Meet me at the station, I said. Bring everything you have access to. He said, on my way. Detective Maria Reyes had been with the county's Criminal Investigations Unit for 14 years. She was compact and unhurried, with the specific patience of someone who has spent a career listening to people and learned how to distinguish signal from noise. She met Emma and me in a small room with plastic chairs and a table and a box of tissues that neither of us touched. She let Emma talk. This is the thing I will always remember about Detective Reyes. She did not redirect, did not prompt, did not project. She just looked at my 7-year-old daughter with complete, level attention and let her say what she had heard. Emma sat in the plastic chair with her feet not quite reaching the floor and repeated, word by word, what she had heard through the cracked door. The police would think it was an accident. When Emma finished, Reyes looked at me. Does your wife think you're still home? Yes, she thinks I'm in my office. Reyes considered that for 3 seconds. Then, let's see what she does when she gets there. Rick arrived at 11:15 a.m. with a hard drive and a laptop bag, and the specific expression he wears when he has already assessed a situation and determined it is serious. He shook my hand, nodded at Emma, and put everything on the table. When I first built our home 7 years ago, I had installed a secondary surveillance system, motion-activated, interior and exterior, fed to an off-site server that Catherine had never known about. Not out of suspicion, out of habit. I am a construction man. I understand how buildings fail and how quickly a thing can go wrong. The system had always been there, quiet and recording, its existence known only to me and subsequently to Rick, who had integrated it into his security monitoring when I brought him on. We pulled the footage. Catherine entered the house at 9:58 a.m., 12 minutes after she'd texted me that she'd forgotten her wallet. She did not go to the kitchen counter where she usually kept her wallet. She went directly upstairs. Trevor came through the back door at 10:03 a.m. Not the front, not the garage. The back door, the one off the kitchen that led to the side yard, which required a key he should not have had. He moved quickly, with the practiced comfort of a man who had been in this house many times. He knew where the cameras were. Or rather, he knew where the cameras Catherine knew about were. He did not know about Rick's system. We watched them talk in my bedroom for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. No audio from that angle. The closest audio pickup was the hallway, but the body language was not ambiguous, urgent, rehearsed. Trevor checked his watch twice. Catherine nodded twice, the precise nod she made when she was confirming a plan. Then she picked up my jacket from the hook by the garage door. Not her jacket, mine. The Carhartt canvas jacket I wore on site visits. She carried it toward the garage. I sat with that image for a long time after. My wife carrying my jacket toward the garage. Reyes ordered a welfare check. Officers arrived at the house at 10:28 a.m. and found a ladder repositioned near the upstairs window facing the gravel driveway below. My tool bag emptied, tools distributed across the garage floor in a specific spread pattern, and my jacket already placed at the base of the ladder, as though it had been there and then the person wearing it had not. Reyes turned from the footage and looked at me steadily. They were setting the scene, she said. The sentence was not dramatic. It was clinical. It was the worst sentence I had ever heard. Rick kept working. While Reyes coordinated with her team, Rick and Sandra Yee spent 18 hours going through every layer of my financial and corporate life. Sandra flagged 6 anomalies in the first 4 hours. Rick found 3 more by morning. The first thing, a life insurance policy Catherine had quietly increased 8 months ago. A rider added to our existing joint policy, bumping my coverage to $4.2 million. She was listed as sole beneficiary. I had not signed the modification. The signature on the rider was mine. It was not my signature. Document forgery. Sandra flagged it to Reyes at 8:47 p.m. The second thing, a succession clause in the Hargrove Group Partnership Agreement, a document I had signed 3 years ago during a routine review that Trevor had walked me through. I am not a man who signs things without reading them. I had read that document, or I had believed I had. The clause was on page 17, in a section of standard boilerplate language about partnership dissolution, nested inside a paragraph about asset distribution. If I died without a designated successor, Trevor assumed full operational control of the company and had first right of purchase over my equity at a fixed valuation, a valuation Trevor's own accountant had set at 60% of actual current market value. If I died, Trevor got Hargrove Group for roughly $4 million less than it was worth. Sandra read the clause to me over the phone at midnight, her voice very controlled. Daniel, this was not in the version you and I reviewed before signing. Are you certain? I keep copies of everything, always. The version in my files does not contain this clause. Someone had swapped the document. The third thing Rick found over the following 2 days was a network of 3 shell companies incorporated in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming that had been receiving wire transfers from Hargrove Group accounts over the past 14 months. Small transfers, carefully sized to stay beneath automatic audit thresholds. $16,000 here, $11,000 there. In aggregate, $438,000. The shell companies had one thing in common: a registered agent whose name I did not recognize, but whose address, a mail forwarding service in McLean, Virginia, matched an address associated with Trevor Trevor's personal accountant. I sat with all of this in Rick's office at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, coffee going cold on the desk, and I did not let myself react until I had seen every piece. Then I let myself understand what I was actually looking at, if the latter had worked. If Catherine had placed my jacket and Trevor had been gone by the time officers arrived, and the scene had been what they'd staged, a man on a ladder, a fall, a gravel driveway, tools scattered in the garage below the way they scatter when someone drops them, then a week from now, Catherine would have been a widow with $4 million in insurance, and Trevor would have inherited a company worth $12 million at a discounted valuation of $8 million, and $438,000 in embezzled company funds would have been unreachable because the only man who knew the accounts well enough to trace them would have been dead. They had planned it. They had resourced it. They had spent months building the structure that would survive my absence. I thought about that for a long time. And then Emma's voice surfaced in my memory. Something she had said at breakfast that morning, sleepy and offhand, the way children say things that destroy you. Daddy, Uncle Trevor said it worked once, and it would work again. I had not processed that sentence fully in the moment. There had been too much else, but I wrote it down and I sat with it for a long time, and then I opened my phone and pulled up the archived news articles about my father's death. Harold Hargrove died 22 years ago. Construction accident at a site in Fairfax County. A steel beam that shifted during a lift. A collapse that the safety report classified as equipment failure. The site's junior safety inspector had signed off on the lift sequence that morning. His name was in the report, Trevor James Higgins, age 23 at the time. I put the phone down. I walked to the window and looked at the parking lot and breathed through my nose and out through my mouth for a very long time. Then I went back to the desk and I told Rick everything. I did not confront them. I want to be precise about this because people have asked me how I stayed quiet, how I sat across from Trevor at a company meeting 3 days after learning what I knew and did not reach across the conference table, how I came home to Catherine on 2 subsequent evenings and made dinner and watched television and went to sleep and did not say anything. The answer is because I had calculated. If I confronted them, they would run or they would accelerate or they would destroy evidence. And I needed the evidence. Not for me, I already knew. I needed it for the case. I needed it for my father. I needed it to be the kind of case that does not get appealed into ambiguity by good defense attorneys. So I was surgical. Rick flagged both their phones for monitoring, legal, under an emergency court order Reyes obtained based on the welfare check evidence. Their credit card activity, same order. He identified the private investigator they had retained, a man named Garrett Foles, operating out of an office in Tyson's Corner, who appeared to have been doing surveillance on my movements for 3 months. Rick submitted a building code complaint about Foles' office to the county. It was not a manufactured complaint. The building had 3 legitimate violations. Foles was evicted within a week. Sandra Yee, working with a forensic accountant Reyes brought in, James Branna, CPA, CFE, 20 years of white-collar crime consulting, spent 4 days reconstructing the shell company transfers. Every wire, every timestamp, every beneficiary account. Branna produced a 58-page financial forensics report that he submitted to Reyes as Exhibit F. He told me privately that it was one of the cleaner embezzlement architectures he'd seen, meaning whoever built it was careful, also meaning he had still found all of it. And in the basement of the county records office, a retired detective named Harold Prentice, 26 years on the force, now consulting in cold case review, spent 6 days with the original file on my father's death. Rick had gone to him directly. Prentice reviewed the original safety inspection sign-off, the load sequence documentation, and the metallurgical report on the beam failure. He found 3 inconsistencies in the original investigation that had never been pursued because nobody had known to pursue them. He found financial records showing that Harold Hargrove Sr., my father, had, in the months before his death, been in the process of freezing Trevor's family out of a joint venture that had gone badly, a dispute that would have cost the Higgins family their remaining company assets. My father had been killed over a business dispute. Trevor had been 23 years old. He had killed my father at 23 and spent the next 22 years becoming my best friend, becoming my partner, becoming Emma's godfather. Waiting for what? The right moment? The right amount of money? Some combination of greed and opportunity that finally aligned? I don't know. I have stopped trying to understand it because there is no version of the answer that makes it smaller. On a Wednesday night, 11 days after Emma came to my doorway shaking, Rick came to me with news. They're moving, he said. Credit card shows 2 one-way flights booked. Day after tomorrow. Trevor's been liquidating the shell accounts. They were getting ready to run. We had 2 days. I spent the first of those days in Reyes's office with Paul Decker, Branna, Prentice, and Rick, building the case into something tight enough that flight wouldn't help them. Reyes coordinated with the DA's office. The financial evidence was solid. The phone monitoring had produced 6 recorded conversations over 11 days. Fragments, careful language, nothing explicit, but in context and combination with the forensic record, enough to support the warrant. But Reyes needed them in the house. She needed the confrontation on record, in a controlled environment to close the loop. They're going to try to come back, Rick said. They think you don't know. They think the ladder failed and they need to try again before they run. They'll make one more move. You're sure? Trevor, I know how people think when they're cornered and running out of time. He looked at me. So do you. He was right. I did. The second day I called Catherine. I told her I was sorry for the tension between us lately. I told her I had been stressed with work. I told her I thought we needed to talk, that I'd be home alone that evening. Emma was at my sister's for the night, and I thought we should have a real conversation about where we were. She said, I'll be home by 7. Her voice was warm, practiced. The voice of a woman who had been managing me for 8 years and believed she still knew exactly what she was working with. I hung up and stood in my empty kitchen for a moment. Then I texted Rick. Tonight. By 5:30 p.m., Rick and I had gone through the house with the methodical attention of two men who understood construction and security and the specific acoustics of a space. Every interior camera active, feeding to the off-site server and to a live stream, connected directly to Detective Reyes's laptop at the command post she'd set up in a county vehicle 1 block away. 2 officers in the utility room off the garage, 2 more upstairs. Reyes would enter when she had what she needed. I sat in the kitchen and I waited. Catherine came through the front door at 7:12 p.m. She was composed. She was wearing the gray cashmere sweater I had always liked on her. She set her keys on the hook, looked at me with an expression of practiced openness, and said, "Hi." "Hey," I said. We sat at the kitchen table. She poured herself a glass of wine. I did not pour one for myself. We talked about nothing for 11 minutes. Work, the weather, the project in Fredericksburg I'd been behind on, and she was so good at it. So completely, frighteningly good at sitting across from me and looking like the woman I had married. The back door opened at 7:24 p.m. Trevor came in without knocking. Of course, he had done it 100 times. He stopped when he saw me looking at him. Something moved across his face, a micro recalibration, quick and almost invisible. Then the familiar smile settled back into place. "Dan, didn't know you'd be home. I live here," I said. The temperature in the room shifted. Catherine set her wine glass down. Trevor glanced at her once, just once, a flicker, and she gave him the smallest shake of her head. I watched it happen. "You've been busy," I said. "Both of you." "I don't know what you," Catherine began. "The insurance policy," I said. "The succession clause, the shell companies in Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming." I looked at Trevor. The beam on the Fairfax site 22 years ago. Trevor went very still. I had thought about this moment, had rehearsed it, had told myself I would stay controlled, and I had. But there was something happening in my chest that had nothing to do with strategy. My father, Harold Hargrove, who had taken me to construction sites before I could read, who had put a hard hat on my head when I was 4 years old and shown me the blueprints for a building as if I were a colleague. My father, dead at 47, and the man who had killed him sitting at my kitchen table for 8 years eating my food and calling me his best friend. "Your father took our contracts," Trevor said. His voice was flat now. The smile was gone. "Every major deal in Northern Virginia for 4 years. He undercut us. He cornered suppliers. He was methodical about it. He didn't have to. He was already the biggest company in the region, but he dismantled my father anyway, just because he could, because he enjoyed it." A pause. "My family lost everything." "So you killed him," I said. Trevor said nothing. "And then you spent 22 years building a position next to his son, waiting. You made it easy," Trevor said. The same phrase I had used about Karen's bank account. The irony was not lost on me. "You trusted everyone who showed up and worked hard and told you what you wanted to hear." Catherine had been quiet. Now she stood up from the table. In her hand, my pistol. From the desk drawer in my office. She had known exactly where it was. "It was never supposed to be complicated," she said. Her voice was the voice I recognized. Measured, direct, economical. She spoke the way she signed documents. The ladder, the tools. "You work at home alone on Saturdays. It would have been 2 minutes. Except Emma heard you," I said. Something crossed her face. Not guilt. I watched for guilt and it wasn't there. More like an acknowledgement of a variable she hadn't weighted correctly. "She's 7, Catherine said. "No one was going to believe Detective Reyes believed her," I said. 14 years on the force. She listened to every word. Trevor moved first. He pulled a gun from his jacket pocket. I had expected it. Rick had told me to expect it, and stepped toward me. That was when Rick came out of the kitchen hallway, and behind Rick, through the garage door, Detective Reyes and 4 officers filled the room. Everything stopped. Trevor's gun was up, Catherine's gun was up, and the room was full of law enforcement, and every second of it was streaming live to the command post and to the DA's office, and had been since 5:30 p.m. "Put the weapons down," Reyes said. "Both of you, now." Trevor looked at the room. He looked at the cameras he hadn't known about, whose small indicator lights Rick had switched on deliberately 5 minutes earlier so Trevor would see them in this moment and understand. He looked at Reyes. He looked at the officers. He looked at me. He put the gun on the counter. Catherine held hers for 3 more seconds. Then she set it down, and the officer nearest her moved, and it was over. They were both in custody by 8 p.m. The charges came down over the following weeks, assembled from the financial forensics, the surveillance footage, the phone records, and Harold Prentice's cold case review, which had by then been formally reopened by the county DA's office. Trevor was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Harold Hargrove Sr., attempted murder in the planning of my death, conspiracy, and financial fraud. The murder charge alone, 2 decades old, had been reconstructed from metallurgical inconsistencies in the original beam failure report, financial records showing the motive, and, the linchpin, a single text message recovered from a backup that Trevor had had believed was deleted, sent between Trevor and an associate 17 years ago, that referenced the Hargrove problem in language that, combined with everything else, was not innocent. Catherine was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted homicide, financial fraud, and document forgery relating to the insurance policy modification. Both pled not guilty. Both went to trial. Trevor's attorney argued that the cold case evidence was circumstantial and that the succession clause had been a standard business provision. Catherine's attorney argued she had been under Trevor's influence, that she had not understood the full scope of the plan, that the gun had been defensive. The jury was given 63 exhibits. They deliberated for 9 hours. Both convicted on all major counts. Trevor, life without parole. Catherine, life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. I was in the courthouse hallway when they brought her out after sentencing. She stopped when she saw me. Her attorney tried to move her forward and she stopped anyway. We could have started over, she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were wet. You and me, before all of this got so far. We could have just... You planned to kill me in my own garage, I said, while Emma was upstairs. I held her eyes for 1 second. Then I turned and walked back to where Rick was standing, and I did not look behind me. My father's case was officially closed 14 months later, reclassified from accidental death to homicide. There was a brief ceremony, not public, just family, where the county formally acknowledged the finding. I stood in the Fairfax County Records office with my sister and my father's oldest friend, and I signed the acknowledgement paperwork, and then I went outside and stood in the November cold for a while. I don't know what I expected to feel. Relief, maybe. Closure, the way people talk about it. What I felt was quieter than that and harder to name. Something like the sensation of a weight you have carried so long you forgot it was there, shifted by an inch, not gone, just moved. Emma is 9 now. She sees a child therapist named Dr. Paula Fenn, who has been working with her for a year and a half, and who tells me, with the careful optimism of someone who takes her work seriously, that Emma is processing things with remarkable resilience. She does not have nightmares. She does not talk about that morning frequently, but when she does, she talks about it the way she talks about everything, directly, precisely, with the calm of a person who has decided that facts are manageable. She asked me once, a few months ago, whether I was sad about Mom. I thought about how to answer for a long time. It's complicated, I said. I'm sad about who I thought she was. Does that make sense? Emma considered it. Yeah, she said. I think so. We have dinner together every night that I'm not traveling. She sits across from me at the kitchen table, and she tells me about school and about her friends and about the book she's reading, and I listen, the way Detective Reyes listened to her, completely, without redirecting, because some things deserve your full attention. She saved my life. She walked into my office on a Saturday morning in her pajamas with the yellow stars, and she was shaking, and she told me the truth when it would have been easier to pretend she hadn't heard. That's the only ending that matters to me. Rick Sullivan still runs security for Hargrove Group. Last year, he was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. He said he didn't want the title. I told him he'd earned it. He took it. Some people, when you trust them completely, never give you a reason to stop. I've learned to pay closer attention to which kind I'm standing next to.